Hey guys, welcome to the third and final part of restoring a Predictas Siesta. This one I went a bit above and beyond and completely tore down the chassis, rebuilt it. It's working now. Got the CRT head unit cleaned up and looking good. The last thing remaining is the cabinet, which has been repainted, but they did not take care of the inside. So with the chassis out, I could see that it was very corroded on the bottom, so I want to do something about it. But the repaint job is pretty nice, so I don't want to mess that up. I also want to clean up the front grille. Now, it's a little bit of a pain in the butt to get off, but I did just take it out. The key to remember is the nut size, 11/32, and they are these cheap stamped nuts rather than machined nuts. I'll be replacing these with real nuts. These tend to get kind of mushed and distorted the more you tighten and loosen them. Alright, obviously the set got water damage. And this backer board in here did get wet. It's not really warped though. And it has all these mounting screws embedded in it, so we basically we don't have much choice but to reuse that. But with it out of the way, I can work more aggressively on the cabinet, and it also means I can take out these Phillips screws and take apart the front. And this is pretty clean, but we can clean it up a little bit, and same with this strip. So maybe I don't need to remove that strip after all. I don't think this needs. Yeah, there's a little bit of a paint chip there, but I'm not going to repaint it. But you know, that's something to consider. Anyways, the main thing I want to take care of now is the corrosion. I thought about dunking the whole thing in some rust remover, but again, that would ruin the repaint job very likely. So what I'm going to do is use a wire brush and a damp rag and clean that out as best I can. Then I'm going to spray it with Rust-Oleum Rusty Metal Primer, which is meant to go over and seal in corrosion. And I'll mask off the outside of the cabinet and spray it on the inside. And then on top of that, I'll put some off-white semi-gloss paint. And then that should take care of the insides. And then be a matter of putting it all back together. Oh yeah, he also picked up some reproduction labels. I believe he got these from TV Restorer guy, the same guy that makes the reproduction couplates. So we have a new tube chart to replace the one that got all water damaged and fell apart. Some new labels for the high voltage box, and one, except this does not have a 6.3 volt heater. This still has the original 2.35, so we won't need that, but I'll keep it with the set. I'll have to take a look around to see where these all go. Look at some of my reference photos. I never purchased a set of these before. It's pretty cool though that these are available and very, very well done. I couldn't tell this from an original. Even the color of the ink is spot on. Alright, let's do it. This is the stuff I've been talking about. Use on heavily rusted metal. It actually has fish oil in it. I've used this on many projects where I either couldn't or didn't want to remove all the corrosion. Completely seal it in, prevent further corrosion, and give you a good surface to put finish paint over. I have masked off the rest of the cabinet. I've been heating up both the cabinet and the paint with a space heater. It's about 40 degrees outside, so it's definitely colder than is ideal, but I'm just going to spray it, wait a few minutes for it to get tacky, and bring it inside to set up. After the Rusty Metal Primer, I used some of this Navajo white Rust-Oleum I had lying around from an old project, and I did a fine job, especially considering nobody's ever going to see this. It's pretty darn close to the original. Also hit up the bottom a little bit. We have a little bit of touch-up to do when I take off the masking. But didn't want to get any on the other painted surfaces, although I think this is a pretty darn good match for the repainted surfaces as well. Alright, so we'll let that set up for a bit, then apply the new tube chart and put this thing all back together. Well, unexpectedly, unfortunately, when I pulled off the painter's tape I'd used to mask off the main body, some of the paint came off. So I'm going to paint the whole thing. And that's great for the owner of this set, because some areas, like where the CRT collar was not fully painted. I presume they left this in place and masked it off, but they didn't get all the way down in as close as they could have, so I've simply completely removed it. So that'll get painted, and there were some defects here and there, so I'm lightly sanding the whole thing, and tomorrow I'll paint the whole thing and blend it all in. And the color that they had used is pretty darn close to the Navajo white that I used on the interior, so basically the whole thing is just going to get another coat of the Navajo. And I'll go over some of this stuff too. So this is the original paint here, and this is whomever chose to paint it at some point, and then this is the new paint I put on. So basically it's just all going to get a fresh coat of paint over the whole cabinet. And hey, why not? I mean, after all the work that's gone into this with rebuilding it, I mean, why not paint the whole thing? The only thing I'll have to do is mask off the feet. I don't know if I did that. I mean, I'd masked these off pretty well, but I don't recall seeing paint on there before. But regardless, that's easy enough to remove. It's actually, that's the one thing that's remarkable about this, is the 4 original feet are intact and in good condition. Often these get worn down, or one or more will break off. I'm going to get in my soapbox for a moment, if you'll indulge me. 2 things really drove me nuts with this project. One, my local home improvement centers no longer carry the 8-ounce cans of Rust-Oleum. You have to buy a quart. I wanted to buy a little half-pint can of the Rusty Metal Primer so I could have applied it with the brush to the interior surface. But no, I would have had to buy an entire quart, which is $17, and would very likely go bad long before I was able to use it all up. I don't know if that was Rust-Oleum's call or the Home Improvement Center's call. I don't know. If I looked around online, yeah, there were a few places selling it, but with shipping and all that, it would end up costing so much it wasn't worth it, so I ended up having to mask off the cabinet using a spray can. Alright, topic number 2. This is what I started with. This can I bought a few years ago of gloss Navajo white. I went looking for it. Nobody had it. Again, I looked online, and if I spent enough money and was willing to wait, yeah, I could get a can of it. I was thinking, well, I guess they discontinued it. But then, got me thinking, maybe not. I looked up the actual serial number, part number, SKU, whatever, for this. And yeah, they do still sell it. They changed the name. I can imagine why they might have changed the name. Regardless, I don't care. I mean, if their marketing geniuses thought they had a new name, regardless of the company, regardless of the product, if you're going to change the name of something that you've been selling for years, you might want to notify people somewhere. It is now called Cottage White. Same thing. They changed the graphics, they changed the name, but the actual number is still the same. I put these 2 names, Navajo White, Cottage White, Rust-Oleum, in this various search engines, came up with nothing. No announcement I could find anywhere, nothing linking these 2. The Cottage White is the same color as Navajo White. That's a really shitty thing to do to your customers. I'm just glad I was able to find it and finish the project. Alright, I'll get off my soapbox. Things are a little chaotic in the basement, so I figured the safest place to put this cabinet while the paint fully cures is on top of the dryer. So I went over it with 320 grit and did a couple light passes of paint. Waited 24 hours, maybe a little longer. 800 grit and then one light pass. And I'm very happy with how it turned out. It's about the best I've ever done. Painter's Choice 2X. It really does cover quite well. Just even with one pass, it pretty well does a very nice solid cover. So inside and out, bottom, top, sides, everything got a fresh coat. Tiny bit of orange peel, but really with a rattle can, that's inevitable. Unless you have a professional spraying rig which does finer droplets, you're going to have at least a little bit. And actually I looked at an original cabinet. I'll give you a look in a moment. And it's not perfect either, so very, very happy with how this turned out. I'm going to let it sit for one more day and then start putting it all back together. Here's another set I just started poking around with. This is a debutante, but same cabinet color. And let's get in close here and look at the paint job. I don't know how well the camera's going to pick that up. I'm trying to put some bright light on it. But there's a little bit of orange peel, there's ripple to it. Really the only way you're going to completely eliminate that is to clear coat it and then buff out the clear coat. Just like I would do with a screen cover, where you might start with a really fine grit of wet sanding and then polishing. So the way spraying works when you use oil-based paint is you get these really fine droplets that come out, and ideally all those droplets melt together, and with the assist of gravity, completely flows out and makes a perfectly flat surface. The reality is that doesn't happen. It sets up before they completely blend together and so on. And then there's powder coating, which is the modern way of doing it, where you put an electrical charge on the metal cabinet and spray a powder onto it and then bake it on or some such. But of course I can't do that in my basement. So anyways, I think that's did just about as good a job as the original. The only thing we're missing is these, which I think were silk screened, the little labels for the controls. But I think that's a very minor thing. So, as I said, we'll let it cure up and then start putting it back together. Reassembly was going fine, or so I thought, but two problems have cropped up. One is something I feared, and I think I commented on when we were checking out the clock mechanism, is the wires break off easily. I think this might be solid core. Yeah, this feels like solid core wire. This goes up front to the, I think, the switch on it. And from me flexing this AC interlock around while installing some other stuff, the flexing finally induced enough metal fatigue, the wire broke off. It's supposed to connect way up there, which I can't possibly get at, so I have to pull stuff out again. Hopefully just the tuner, not the entire chassis. And the other problem is, I thought I'd be able to install the antenna after everything else. No. It needs to go through the bottom and come out that hole. And with certainly with this control harness in place, I can't do it. So close to being done, but this has got to come out. This has got to come out. This has got to come out. I need to reconnect that wire. Then I think I can put the back on this, and we'll take one good final look at it all back together and playing. Fingers crossed. Here's a look at the new labels. I'm applying them with basically rubber cement. So there is the one caution about high voltage, and there is the new tube chart. Not all of these apply to every model and every situation. For example, this set is still using the original low voltage CRT, but if I had put in a 6.3, I would use that. We have a few duplicates of this guy that I've already used there. I'll have to double check my reference photos. I'm not sure about the rest of these, but I think you get the idea. Wasn't sure what kind of cement to use, but I did some experimenting, and this seems to work pretty well. Kind of when you want to glue two very dissimilar surfaces, rubber cement tends to work well, especially if you put some on either surface and let it dry, and then stick them together. It sticks to itself very well. So I think that takes care of it. Oh, I'll show you what the back looks like. The back for the Siesta is a little odd because they took the standard chassis and they put this extra interlock so they could run it power to the clock, so that when the set's plugged in, there's always power going directly to the clock, but power that comes out of the clock and back to the set is controllable by the clock timer mechanism. So there's a bump out there, and that's why you've got this little shell on the back to cover that up. And that will go on like so. Need to do a little bit of work on the antenna terminals. The wires are kind of broken off, or at least one of them is. But for now, I'll use some alligator clips so we can get this set running and see what the picture looks like. Oh my goodness, I am finally almost done with this set. Here's a look at it. The new paint job. Replacement antenna installed. The brass painted arms and collar. The TV restorer guy, the guy who sells the reproduction couplates, also sells new end caps, and the owner, pretty sure said he did have some. I do too, but so I left these kind of loose. I think TV restorer guy has ones made out of brass that are really nice, perfect fit. They don't get the cruddy look on them, so I'll let him install those when he gets the set back. Similarly, he kept, or has at his place, the faceplate that goes over here. But I just happen to have a spare that I'll pop on there so you guys can see what this would look like when it's all together. Well, these are fragile, they tend to crack. It's hard to avoid, especially where the mounting screw goes, but it goes on something like that. It's plugged in right now, the clock is running. You can see the second hand is traveling around there. So what's left? I need to install the reproduction labels. I've been kind of ignoring this, but I think this does need to get touched up. The perforated front grill has some paint scraped off here and there. I'm not going to repaint the whole thing. I'll just get a little bit of touch-up paint and brush it on there. Put the back on the set and make sure it still works. Here is the set all back together. I'm playing. I have alligator clips going to the antenna terminals right now. So we're getting a little bit of interference. The picture's jumping a little bit. I need to do a little bit of work on that. But I wanted to wrap things up for tonight and get this video out. This project was quite the undertaking. I wanted to leave you guys with something special as I depart from the 17-inch sets for a little bit, but not too long actually, because another one was just dropped off today. Let's see, I touched up the front grille here with just a brush and a little bit of paint. It's a little bit brighter than the rest, so once it dries, I'm going to rub over it a little bit with a darker color to kind of dirty it to blend it in. And here's what that clock looks like with a control panel installed and the two knobs for the clock timer functions. That's going to be it for this project. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know I did. I'd never gone to such extreme lengths on a project before. It turned out better than I expected, and in terms of after tearing it down and putting it all back together and rewiring it all, it basically worked without having to do a ton of troubleshooting. And that's what I get for working on about 20 of these in the last year and a half or so. It's kind of imprinted in my brain now of where all the wires go. Alright, that is going to be it for 17-inch sets for a little while, but another one was just dropped off today, and we'll be doing triage on that really soon. As always, thanks for watching.